So in today's lecture, we're going to review some of the concepts we went over last class regarding layers, lines, and polylines, and then we'll look into some new features about how to insert blocks as well as add in different dimensions and annotations to our drawings. So to put all of our different line work in, we first changed our units, of course, to architectural, and then we were able to use either the line and the polyline tool to create these shapes. So the tools are up here, and again, the keyboard shortcut for line is the letter L. Let me make sure I'm actually in AutoCAD. L, enter, and then you can click on the point you want to start, point your mouse in the direction you want to go, type the distance you want. If you want feet, you have to make sure you're putting the foot tick mark and hit enter, and then direction you want to go, distance you want, enter, and then to end the command, you'd hit the escape key. A big difference with the line and polyline tool, like we went over in class. So if I start polyline with PL, enter, it's going to look very similar, but then if I go to use an offset, this is going to offset as one piece versus this offsetting as two separate pieces. So to show that with offset up here, I'll use the keyboard shortcut O, enter, and I'll just leave my distance set as through, so I'll just hit enter again, click on my object, direction I want to bring it, type my distance, enter. So this all gets offset as one piece versus this is going to be two separate pieces. Now, in some cases, line would be preferred, especially if I'm just laying out guideline work. But here, if I'm laying out all of my actual walls, polyline can be preferred a lot. So there is a way to turn lines into polylines and polylines into lines using explode and join. So I went over that briefly in class last time, but I'll go over it a little bit more this time. So I'll just click on these two lines and I'm just going to delete them, and click on these lines and delete these as well. So I'm just using the delete key on my keyboard to do that. But if I wanted to turn these into two lines that are together, I'm just going to window around them or click on them to highlight both of them, and then I'm going to use the command join to put them together. So I'm going to hit J, enter, and now these are two combined pieces, and if I went to go offset them, it's going to offset them as one combined piece. And if I wanted these to become separate pieces, I can explode them using the explode tool. So again, I'm just going to click on my object, and then I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut X, enter. And now these are two separate pieces. So if I went to offset them, these are going to come as separate entities. So if you do something in a polyline and you wanted to change it after the fact, you can easily make some changes to it. Or if you do something in a line tool and you say, oh, I actually want these joined together, you can put them back together using join, or you can take them apart using explode. If you are someone who likes the buttons instead of the keyboard shortcuts, the explode button is right here in your toolbar, and then to get to the join button, you're going to click on the word modify, and then it's, whoops, it went away. It's right here, so it's kind of hidden away in the toolbar for those tools. But those are two tools that I really prefer. Whoops, I'm still in the offset command. I just prefer using keyboard shortcuts for. So I'm just going to take that work there and just delete it, just as a little kind of review from some of our tools. And now I have my floor plan completed and my elevation view completed as well. So I filled these in using the hatch tool, which is another command that we went over briefly at the end of class. And so hatch is located up here, or it's keyboard shortcut H, And what hatch does is it fills areas in with specific patterns. So if I want something filled in solid, I would just use the solid one, or I could choose between patterns. Now some patterns, particularly in architectural drawings, if I click and switch over to this diagonal line pattern, this brick hatch, it's not showing up, and it actually is there. I just need to play around with the scale here. So right now it's set at a scale of 1, and if I make that number larger, now it's going to become 12 times as big, so I can start to see those. You can also click on these arrows here to move it around, or you could just type the number directly in. You can also play around with the angle of the hatch as well. So I can either drag this bar to move the angle, or I could type in a specific amount to make the lines either flat or vertical. So in our hatch menu, there is one for horizontal lines. I believe there is a hatch pattern for that, but most of the time I will use this ANSI 31, and then I'll just angle it based on whether I want vertical lines or horizontal lines. So while there's not a specific hatch pattern for that, we can definitely make one happen if we need it. So that was covered in the recording video from last class, and that's how I added in this pattern here. Now, if I wanted to just draw that in with separate lines, I could absolutely do that. I could just draw one line, and I could offset it all the way up and then trim it down to size. And the same thing too with hatches is that they're always going to be a connected piece, kind of like a joined polyline. So if I click on this, it brings me right back into the hatch menu, and I could then like change the hatch pattern or change the settings or the layer that it's in. I could do a bunch of that. But if I wanted to, let me just hit escape to get out of the hatch. If I wanted to separate this hatch into different pieces, I could use the explode tool to explode it. However, I cannot join it back into a hatch. So if you are going to explode a hatch, you have to be sure that that's what you want to do, because the only other way to get it back would be to Control Z to just undo it. So if I go into the explode tool, which again is keyboard shortcut X, and then you hit enter or space, I could click on the hatch itself and hit enter or space again. And now this is no longer a hatch pattern. This is just a series of lines I put here. So if you are going to do something like explode a hatch, you have to make sure that that is indeed what you want to do. So I'm just going to Control Z to make my undo that and make my hatch back into a pattern, because I do want to keep mine as a pattern. So one thing, now to start with some new stuff, one thing that I've mentioned before in class is that walls are made up of a series of layers. So there's different parts to our wall. We've got like our exterior siding, and then our sheathing, and then our stud, and then like our gypsum wallboard on the inside. And since we're drawing everything full size when we're working in AutoCAD, we want to make sure that we are detailing all of that information in our sets of plans, so that way we can just set our scale when we're in paper space to deal with those different parts or pieces. So right here, I just have my wall set as a generic 6 inches thick, but instead I'm going to add in some details to say how far out the siding goes, and then how far in the stud and the gypsum wallboard is. So we're going to use a series of offsets to do that. Since our measurement typically is coming from the, let me move this over so the keyboard isn't in the way. Since our measurement's typically coming from the face of stud, this 10 foot can be, this is the outside of our stud, and we'll say that this is framed out of 2x6s, and we'll use actual measurements. So I'm going to offset it in 5.5, and then we'll use the extra 1/2 inch that will exist here to represent our gypsum wallboard, and then we'll offset out as well to cover our which this is in the wrong layer, whoops, or is that actually, nope, that was just a little extra line there, to cover for our siding and our sheathing. So I'm going to go into the offset tool up here, And this is where, again, this through option, so since it's in this triangle brackets, that's what it's set to by default. But if there's a number written in there, you can always click on through or type in a capital T. But since that's what my default is, I'm just going to hit enter. And I'm going to offset these lines. I'm going to bring this one in. So I'm just going to click on it, move my cursor in the direction I want to go, and I'm going to do 5.5, enter. And so then from here to here is representing my stud, and then that's representing my gypsum wallboard that's on the inside. Then I'm going to click on the same line, and this time I'm going to bring it out, and I'll bring it out 0.75, and that then is going to represent the layer of my plywood sheathing. And then I'm going to bring it out a 1/2 inch, and then this will represent like my siding, my clapboard's siding that's going on it. So now I'm just framing out the different layers of my wall. So I'm going to go through and just offset some of the other features. So again, I'm going to come out, 0.75, enter. I'll click on this one. I'll bring that one out, 0.5, enter. And then I'll go back to my original stud and bring it in, 5.5, enter. Which, did I do 5.5? Because that does not seem like the correct amount. I think I might have clicked instead of hit enter, and that's why I brought it to a weird point. And same thing I'll do up here. I'll bring this one in, 5.5. Which, why is it doing that? So weird. And then I'll come out 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll come out a 1/2 inch. And I'll come back later and I'll fill these in using either just the grips or extend. So I'll hit escape to end the offset command, and then I'm just going to click on my little end piece here, select this grip, and I'm just going to move it out. Same thing then with this line here is I'm actually going to click on this grip, and I'm just going to zoom in and move it to meet where that intersection is for my deck here. So typically what I do is when I'm selecting grips, I just click and bring them to points, and then I hit escape to deselect the grip, but you don't technically have to be hitting escape. You can just keep them all highlighted as you do this. So I'm just going to click on the grip, move it over, pan my way over using the scroll wheel, click on my line, click on this blue grip, bring it down to there, click on my line, click on my blue grip, bring it over, click on my line, click on my blue grip, bring it over. Now I also currently have my line weight turned off so that it's not displaying, but all of my lines for my wall work now are in the same layer. So if I turn that back on using the command LW display, so I just typed in LW, and I'm going to just click on display from this menu. It's currently set to off, so I can type in on, enter, and now it is showing me line weights. And the problem I'm having is this line weight is so thick and heavy that it's overpowering each other when I'm looking at it from a distance. So I need to change these lines in here, all of these interiors. I need to change their layer. So I'm just going to click on each one of them, and then I'm going to come up here to my layer drop down, and I'm going to change them to layer 4. Or actually, yeah, I'll do layer 4. And so again, to change any of those, now since I have all of these selected, it's currently reading as layer 4. But if I come down here and I pick one of these, it now says something blank. because I have multiple things selected that are in different layers. So since they vary, it's not going to be able to display up here. But that's okay, because I just still want to just make them all one. So I even just windowed around those instead of selecting them. And I can come up here and switch the layer around. So if you do something in the wrong layer at first, and I'm even just going to window around this whole corner just to get these 3 lines all at once. But if you do something in the wrong layer, you can absolutely change it after the fact. It's not set in stone, so you can solve those problems. So the only thing we want in that heavy line is the absolute outside, going from the very face of the gypsum wallboard to the very face of our cladding on there. So if you do mess something up, it is okay. It can be fixed after the fact when it comes to CAD work. So now I've got my different layers for my wall, and I'm going to start putting in my windows and doors. So 2 ways I could do it, and in the video from from the first part of this assignment, I did go over just how to draw in the windows yourself and how to mirror them and rotate them and copy them around. But you can also go and use Cad Blocks to put them in there and insert in ones that you either find off the internet or you can get directly from the CAD library itself. So Cad Blocks are inserted using this insert tool. If I click underneath the word insert, it's going to show me all of the ones I currently have in my drawing, which, since this is a completely blank drawing from a totally fresh template, I don't have any in there. So I'm just going to click on blocks from libraries, and then it'll bring up where I have different blocks located. So it'll bring up your own library area by default. I've set for my library to go to my external hard drive and find ones in there. There's also in like the AutoCAD library, they'll have some defaults loaded in for things. So here, these also look like some chairs that I had downloaded from previous drawings for students. But I'm just going to go into my libraries and I'm going to search through it since I have libraries that I know I want to use from. So I'm going to go back into here, and I think it actually might be in general would be where I want to look through, because I'm sure they have a window in here somewhere. But maybe not. We've got graphic scales. We've got, nope, looks like no windows. And I didn't finish renaming all my folders. I started doing it and then I said, here's a bunch of doors and windows. Boom, here's the folder I want. That was easy. So I want this folder, and I can go find a window. And then I can click to place it. It came in extremely small, and that's because I believe I didn't reset in my units when I originally made this drawing. So let me go into my units. So yeah, I didn't set my scale to millimeters. So if I change that to millimeters, and it'll say, hey, that's probably a bad idea, I'm going to say, no, do it anyway. And there we go. Now this window is coming in at a much more normal size, but it still isn't the exact size I want it to be. And I could stretch it out here, but the better way I find to just move or change windows around is to use my rotate and my copy, my move, and especially my scale. So I want this window to fit in this 3-foot wide opening, and currently, if I draw a line, it is currently 2 foot and 1.375 inches long. But I want it to be 2 feet or 3 feet long, excuse me. So what I need to do is figure out what I want my scale factor to be for this window to change from being 2 foot 1 3/8 into 3 feet. So first I need to break down what this number in the white text box, what that number would be just in inches. So that'd be 24 plus 1.375 or 25.375, and I want it to be 36 long. So I'm going to go into my calculator and I'm going to take the number I want, which is 36, and I'm going to divide it by the number I have, which is 25.375. And that gives me my scale factor to use in the scale command. And I'm just going to write that down on a scrap of paper, that I want this window to be 1.41872 times as big as it currently is. So I usually round that number because I'm not writing down this whole decimal. So now I've got the scale factor I want for this window. So I'm going to click on it now, and I'm going to use the scale tool. And the same thing too applies for finding windows online, and we'll go over that in a second. So I'm going to scale this window up. It's first asking me to specify a base point, so that just means where do you want to grab it by, and I'm just going to click on that endpoint. And now it's asking me to specify my scale factor, and this is where I'm going to use the number I found of what I want divided by what I have. So I'm going to do 1.41872, enter, and now my window is going to be 3 feet long. It's a little bit larger since I rounded that number, but I'll be okay. So now I have the window in the size I want, and I can even click on it, and I can change its layer to the layer I want. And if I wanted to take this block and change some of the lines to different layers, I can take this block and explode it by just clicking on it and using the keyboard shortcut X, enter, and now it's no longer a block. Now it's just a bunch of pieces of geometry. So I can click on them and I can change this to layer 2, hit escape, and I can select these lines and change them to layer 3. So if I want them in different layers, I can easily change things around. But blocks can just make it easier than instead of having to draw in all of your details, especially if you're going to have a window that's a little bit more like complicated in its components or its drawing types. Now to move this window into place, I'm just going to highlight the entire thing. So I just clicked and to make a box around it, or you could lasso around it. And then I'm going to use the move tool, which is located up here, or keyboard shortcut M. So I'm just going to go into the move tool, and it's asking me to specify a base point, which again is just a point you want to grab it by. So I always grab it by a place where I know I want it to be. And in this case, I know I'm going to want the middle of this to sit on the middle of the wall. So I'm going to grab it by its midpoint. And then I'm just going to move my way over and put it in the middle of the wall. Now it doesn't still fit exactly maybe how I want it to, because that's just how this block was created. So I can always take some of my grips again and stretch it down. And if I want it to sit nice and lined up with here, I can hover over points and click to place them. Click, hover over a point, click to place it. And I'll do the same thing with this one. So I'm clicking on my grip, I'm hover overing this endpoint, but I'm not clicking on it. Let me move it over. But if I hover over and don't click, it gives me that crosshair, so then I can see where those two would meet up, and it allows me to keep that nice in place. And I can stretch this up, hover over, click on my grip, hover over, and I know it's turning real funky, but once I then get it into place, I'll click, and then I can draw in or customize my window like that. I could also draw that in all myself just using the line tool, the polyline tool, or the rectangle tool, and I could get the exact same end result. Now, if I wanted to find a block off the internet, I can go online, and I could just search for window Cad block. Now, this is a website I love for Cad blocks. This one is okay, but some of them are not free. Cad Blocks Free is also a good one. So some of these websites are going to be free, some of them are going to cost money. It all depends. Now, these ones are probably a little bit more complicated than what I want in my drawing. So we can see here that this is the block for what it would look like in plan, and then this is what it looks like in elevation. It's a little bit more than what I want. So I'm going to see if I can find some more simple ones. These ones seem a little bit more simple and useful for my drawing. It has this little extra sill piece to it, but I could, of course, just explode it and get rid of that. Let me see if I can find a different website. So sometimes you've got to just look through to see if you find the ones that you perfectly want. If it is a free one, it'll absolutely let you know that it's free, and this is even saying that it's going to be an AutoCAD DWG file. That's what that icon means. Some of them cost money here, so this is a volume, so every one of these is a different window that you'd be able to download, and it cost £500. So I don't know exactly what that would be in American dollars, but it costs money to download it. And on this website too, they have some blocks that cost money to download. And I don't think there's any issue with that, purely because somebody spent a lot of time drawing all of these out in AutoCAD, and so for you to be able to download them to put in your drawings for like your interior elevations, the fact that they are asking for $30, they totally have an absolute right to do so. Cadblocks.net is another great website for downloading free CAD blocks, and a lot of them are very simple, but sometimes that's what we want. So they've got furniture, bathroom stuff, and I believe in the doors one is actually where they have windows as well. Unless, nope. They've got, but they do have windows here, that I know. Would it be in just with others? Let's search right on their website for windows, unless they got rid of their window ones. Doors, bathroom, milk. Oh no, I guess they got rid of their windows ones. So, let's see. I don't want to spend too much time looking over different CAD blocks to download, but and so this too, so these are looking like they're CAD blocks that are coming right from a manufacturer, so then you know it's exactly the one you want. So I'm just going to go with this one. Again, you can find any one you want and download it. I'm just going to download a DWG. I've got to make an account with them, of course. Sure. Why not? Oh, geez. Hold on. Let me add in all this info. Alright, so I put in my info and I was able to download this CAD block. And so now I have it right here. I'll just ignore this reference file. And I have the CAD block as a plan drawing for this specific window, but it opened it up in a new tab up at the top. So what I could do here then is just window around the part I want and use Control C to copy it, and then go into my drawing file, Control V to paste it. And sometimes, again, it's going to come in at a very different size than what you want it to be. And so if that is ever the case, if it is imported in at a totally different size, you can measure how much it currently is and then use your scale options to shrink it down using a ratio of what you have, what you want divided by what you have. So I can use the line tool to measure from frame to frame. It's currently, let me make sure I'm going straight across. It's 3'10". So I can say, okay, I have 46 and I want 36. So I'll take out my calculator and I'll do 36 divided by 46, enter, and then I get a scale factor of this needs to be 0.78261 shorter. And so I just make sure that I write that down somewhere because I'm not going to memorize that number. Window around everything. Scale. Click a base point that you want. And then you can shrink it down to be 0.78261. Enter. And now it is going to be a little bit smaller. And again, my scale is not going to be perfect since I rounded that number, but I'm close enough to fit in my area here. That, though, window is a little bit too complicated for me or for what I want my drawing to look like, so I like this kind of more simple one. So I'm going to go with this CAD block that came out of here, and you do have access to this folder through the downloads on As You Learn. And even then, another thing you could do too is after you download them, you can directly open up drawings from here. So I could just look at my window fixed. I can double click on it, and here it is. And I can highlight the whole thing, Control C, go into my drawing, Control V. However, it's going to come in very, very tiny. And so again, I'll have to use scale then, which I don't even know if this will read as. So it's currently 1 inch, and I want 36, so I have to make it 36 times as big. So I'll click on the window, or highlight the window. I'll come up here to scale, which is keyboard shortcut SC. Click a base point to grab it by, and then I'm going to zoom out 36, enter. And now it's 36 times as big. And if I want to just rezoom to my whole drawing, I can remember that if I double click my scroll wheel like a button, it just zooms out to my whole drawing. And so now this is 36 times as big, and I can apply my different layers. So you can work through how you want to put your windows in, what you want them to look like, which blocks you want, however you so choose. But since I already got this one here, I'm just going to work with that one. So I now want to take this block and copy it over into here, but it needs to get rotated around. So first I'm going to highlight my whole block, and I'm going to make a copy of it. The copy tool is located right here, or keyboard shortcut CO. And just like with move and just like with scale, it requires us to pick a point we want to grab it by. So a lot of times with copies, especially if I have to rotate it, I just grab it by any point, and I'm just going to copy it by there. And since I need to rotate it into here, I'm just going to move it just plain over there. And I'm just going to leave it in this corner for now and hit escape to end the command. Then to rotate it, I'm going to select the whole thing again, and I'm going to use the rotate tool here to grab it by a base point. So that's the point that's going to stay stationary in the drawing or in the selection. So I'll grab it by one of the corners, and then I can either swing it into a particular corner or a particular direction, or I could type in a specific angle. So if I wanted to rotate it, in this case, since I'm going down 90 degrees, that'd be 360 minus 270. Sorry, I have to speak math out loud, otherwise I can't figure it out. And now I have it facing the direction I want, and I can highlight it again and use the Move tool up here or keyboard shortcut M to grab it by a particular place and then put it in an area. Since I know I want it to be on that edge, I can just click on it and grab it in there. And now I have my window in place as well. So same thing with my door. I could use a block to do the door. I could draw the door in myself manually. I'll just draw my door in, because this way I can also just redo the rectangle tool for a refresher. So I'm going to switch my layer over to CAD 2. That's another thing too, when you download blocks off the internet, a lot of times they'll come in with their own special layers, and then you'll have a big layer list here. And I'm going to use the rectangle tool this time for it, so that's located right here, or keyboard shortcut REC. And I'm going to click on this area, and then I want it to be 3 feet long and about 1.5 inches or so wide, depending on the exact door we're using. So in order to type in my first dimension, I'm going to do 3 feet, and I'm not going to hit enter. Instead, I'm going to hit tab, and now I can type in 1.5, enter. And so that then will give me the rectangle that makes up my door. And then I'll switch my layer over, and I could just draw a line that connects from here to here to show my door swing. So now I have my windows, my doors included, and I can use either blocks to do that, or I could draw them in myself, depending on how I want to work. So now that we have our floor plan set up and our blocks loaded in, we'll go over how to add dimensions. The first thing I'm going to do is actually turn my line weights back off, just because the bold lines for me make it a little bit more confusing. So again, for that command, it's LW display. I'm going to click on it and set it to off. Enter. So that way it's just a little easier for my eyes, but that could be up to you and your preference. So to add in dimensions and annotations, that's going to be up here in this area. So I like to use the tools here from this drop down to add in my dimensions. This quick dimension tool is nice and it can be helpful, but I find it a lot of times that it is guessing the wrong dimension for what I want to do, particularly in architectural drawings. So I like to just manually click on the 2 points that I want to measure between. So I'm just going to use the default option, this linear one. And since I want to measure from stud to stud, I'm going to zoom in and do it from this line to this line. And then I'm going to move up to place it. And I have placed a dimension in here, but several things you might notice. I'll even move it into the dimension layer, this cyan one. So it's a little easier to see, but still not quite, because it placed a dimension here. It put that extension line out, and it even left that little gap that I wanted. It put a leader head on there, and it does have a number, but the number is text size, incredibly small, and it's also in the wrong unit. And so we need to update our dimension styles so that way it will be in the correct unit. So to do that, I can either go into the Annotate tab and then click on this tiny arrow, or what I think is the better option is to use the command dimsty, D-I-M-S-T-Y, all one word. Enter. And either way, it's going to bring up this our dimension style manager. You probably are only going to have standard and annotative. I have these two because these are two that came along with that CAD window I downloaded off the internet. So we are going to modify the standard one. So I'm just going to click on standard and go into modify. And the first thing we're going to do is change our unit format from decimal to architectural. We can leave the precision set at a 1/16 of an inch. If you want to, that's totally fine. We don't need to change it. I'll usually, for architectural drawings, change it to about 1/4 of an inch though, because I very rarely am I going to need that 1/16 of an inch precision when it comes to it. And other than that though, I'm going to leave all of my unit formatting alone. Then I'm going to go into my text option, and I'm going to change my text height from 3/16 of an inch. I'm going to highlight that inch part, and I'm going to change my text height to either 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches. Those are all pretty convenient heights. And -4. There we go. So now it's 4 inches tall for my text. And then in my symbols and arrows area, I'm going to change my arrow head from closed filled to an architectural tick, and it changed it for all of these. And then for my size, again, I'm going to change this one to 4 inches as well. So I want to make sure I get rid of that 0 beforehand. And so it's just 0 feet 4 inches. And then my break size, I'm going to change that to 3 inches. And I'll click OK, and I'll click close, and I'll see my text update. So now I have it saying that it's 10 feet, tick mark. It didn't put my little extension here, didn't change, so I still have to change a little bit with my dimension styles. And it also doesn't have the text exactly how I want. So I'm going to go back into that dimension style, which again is dim sty, or in the annotate tab, this tiny button right here. And I'm going to go back into modifying my text or my piece. And I'll go into the text one, and let's see, I'll go into fit, nope, primary units. So in here too, for unit format, it's suppressing if it has 0 feet or 0 inches. So I want to untick that because I do want it to put that if there are 0 inches, I want it to actually say that there are 0 inches. So I'm just going to untick that. And then, where would it be? Here it is, this line here in this offset from origin. We're just going to change this offset to 3 and our extend beyond the dimension line. So that's how far it comes off of this piece. We'll make that 2. And I'll say OK. And I'll say close. And then it leaves a nice convenient gap. If I wanted to move this dimension around, I can click on it, and I can click on the grips and move it up and down. And I can also click on these grips here and change where it's referencing to. So if I wanted to reference from the very outside rather than from the stud, I can do that, and the number will update in the dimension for me. So if I do my dimension wrong, if I start from the wrong piece, I can always just click on it and move it so that way it's on the correct part of it now. So if I wanted to dimension from edge of here to the center of the window, now that I have my dimension style set, all of my dimensions in this drawing are going to show up this way. So I can just come to the dimension tool, click on the endpoint I want to go to, and then if I want the middle of this window, I'm going to hold shift and right click and say midpoint, and then I can go to the middle of the window. Now since I forgot to change my layer back over, it put it in layer 3, but I can always just click on it and change it to layer 5. And then this time before I place dimensions, what I'm going to do is click on this again and switch myself to the right layer so I don't accidentally go to the wrong thing too. Another thing you can do with your object snaps is you can change which ones show up by default. So if I go into the line tool, it automatically is showing me midpoints of things, even though I'm not doing that shift right click. And that's because I came to my object snap settings down here. And on my computer, I have it set to default show me midpoints. So if I uncheck that, now when I'm just in the line tool, it's no longer going to show me the middle of features or lines. So if you don't want to do shift right click, you can come right down here to your object snaps and you can say just always show me the midpoint. You can also turn object snaps completely off. So if I click on that button, they're gone now. Now I don't recommend doing that, but sometimes object snaps can get in the way and you may want to temporarily turn them off. So you can do that down here or on your keyboard using the function key F3 to turn them on and off as well. So to place some more dimensions, I would just go into the dimension tool and I can click on the first point I want to reference, pan myself down, click on the next point I want to reference, and then move it out. Dimension, first point I want to reference, the middle of this window, and then click to place where we want to put it. And if you don't put it exactly where you want, you can of course move or stretch them to whatever point you may want them to be. If I want to put text, just straight up text or leader annotations on things, I can use the text tool here in the toolbar. So I can start a text box and I'm just going to click and make diagonally a box, click to place it, and then I can type in whatever I want. By default, it's going to set it to this small size, so again, we're not going to be able to read any of it. But if I highlight all of my text, I can come here to my options, and I can change this to be 3 inches. Enter. It's going to look a lot larger than it actually is. I can also change the text size and the color if I wanted to make it bold or italicized. But once I hit close editor, it'll then go back to a normal size. So a lot of times in the text editor, it's going to make it seem huge when in reality it is not. If I wanted to place text boxes here and here, I could also recreate these two, or what I'm going to do is just go click on this one and go into the copy tool and then copy this tag to here, copy it over here, hit escape, click on it, rotate it, and then I'm just going to click on it and actually move it with this grip. So I'm going to click on this grip. And then I can double click in a text box if I wanted to edit it after the fact. I can just double click and I can change it. I think this is 50. Let me double check. Yep. And then once I'm done, I'd either hit escape or I can come up here and click close text editor. And so I'm actually, for me, I'm going to get rid of that one there. And I'm going to put it on this side instead. From there to the middle. And then another one from the middle to the end of the porch. And if I want these two to be lined up with each other, I can click right there. And now these two are aligned. And even if I wanted to unalign them, I can easily just click on the grip and move it. Or if I didn't align them in the first place, again, I can click on the grip and I can then move it so that the two snap points are coming together. So things are not necessarily going to be permanent when we're creating our drawings. And in many ways, that can be a good thing, that we can change things up and move them around as we need to or as we see fit. So I did forget to do a CAD block in here in this video, but I wanted to try to keep the video as short as possible. Plus, I also need to keep in mind that during class time, I'm going to have to stop and redo things. So for the second part of this assignment, you are going to be adding in the blocks for the windows, the doors, and all of the text, as well as the dimensions, the annotations for the north arrow for the floor plan, the annotation for the roof pitch, and then the elevation heights, the spot elevation dimensions. So hopefully this video will help you out, and I will see you in the next one.